Whoever's leading the way, roll a survival check.
12.
Okay, you travel for a few hours along the river uneventfully.
Oh joy. Time for our daily randomly generated fight with bandits, or goblins, or...
An echoing howl breaks the silence of your forest trek.
Ah yes, wolves. Classic. Lord of the Rings really gave us unrealistic expectations for fantasy travel, didn't they?
I think we've probably all either played in or run a travel session in D&D that just bored everyone to tears. The DM's Guide has a few different suggestions for how to handle overland travel, and to be honest, they're not great. Here's their example of, quote, evocative and memorable travel description. Around midday, you break for lunch under a lonely tree. There, the rogue finds a small rock that looks like a grinning face, but otherwise, you encounter nothing out of the ordinary. Oh boy, my favorite part of the epic fantasy tale was when the heroes found a rock that looked like a face and meant nothing. The DMG basically tells you to either skip over travel and just give a little summary, or to take it hour by hour, calling for rolls to navigate and keep watch, and throwing in some planned and random encounters. Their best advice for making sure that these encounters don't get repetitive? If one encounter comes at the adventurers from the front, the next one might come at them from above or behind. Wow! Exciting! Travel comes up eventually in most D&D games, and depending on how closely your players follow your trail of narrative breadcrumbs, you might not even have much warning for when it's going to come up. That's why it's super important to have a good understanding of how to run a travel session without putting your players to sleep. In this video, we are going to go beyond download some random encounter tables. Fighting some bandits or stumbling across a ruin does not an interesting journey make. I'm going to give you 3 ways to change travel from something that you and your party dread to something nearly as epic as the Fellowship traversing the rolling hills of New Zealand on horseback. Nearly. It's a high bar. If you think of the journey as the way that you get to the quest, there's no way that it's not going to feel like filler, because that's literally what it is. Any efforts to spice it up are just trying to disguise that. So to solve it, just don't make it filler. Make the journey itself into or part of a quest. Here's the thing that makes random encounters boring. They don't mean anything. They're not connected to your plot. Oftentimes no real choices get made. There are no consequences as long as you manage not to die. That's what makes them feel like they're just filling space, because if they didn't happen, nothing would be lost. Let's imagine you have a 3-day journey, and on each day you roll on a random encounter table. On the first day, the players come across some bandits trying to rob a merchant, and they fight them off and save him. Second day, wolves attack in the middle of the night, and third day, they stumble on an abandoned farmhouse and pick up some mildly interesting loot. Then they arrive at their destination. Not exactly a memorable session. But now let's try treating this 3-day journey as its own quest. Build it the same way that you would build any quest, with escalating action, relevant NPCs, tasks to accomplish, and choices to make. Your players set off for their first day of travel. They pass a merchant on the road who at first threatens the players, but if questioned, admits that he's heard tales of bandits on this road and is afraid of being a target. Maybe your players suggest that they travel together for protection, or maybe not. On the first night, a lone, stealthy bandit rifles through their saddlebags under the cover of darkness. If their watchman's perception is good, maybe they catch him and they get some clues. If not, they will discover on the road tomorrow that they're missing a few valuable items. The next morning, they spot a wagon on the side of the road burnt to ashes. Later that day, they're ambushed by 3 bandits. If they decide to question them, they might find out that the bandit camp is a half-day's travel ahead, just past a stone bridge. That might determine whether or not they're surprised when they cross paths with the whole bandit encampment on their final day of travel. If they helped the merchant, maybe he'll give them a discount at his store in the next town. By taking care of the bandit problem, they have curried favor with the local leader. Basically, the events of this journey have affected the rest of the game. You have plenty of building blocks to work with when putting together this kind of travel quest. Here are a few things to consider if you're looking for inspiration. Environment. How's the weather? Or the landscape? Are they hacking their way through a dense jungle, following a well-traveled road, navigating a series of confusing tunnels under a mountain? NPCs. They might run into other travelers or locals who need help, act as threats, want to charge travelers a toll, or have items or services for sale. Encounters. Random encounters might be boring, but that doesn't mean that you can't have any encounters. There are, of course, plenty of ways to tie combat with monsters, beasts, or other people into the story you're building. Locations. Ancient ruins, buildings and their occupants, natural areas like waterfalls or cliffs or marshes. Maybe they'll find abandoned campsites from previous travelers. Choices. It's always boring to have no agency, so consider that your players might make choices that take them down different routes. Whether that means a classic fork in the road or something more subtle that changes the way the journey goes for them. Just like with any quest, create a narrative arc. And if you're worried that you're gonna have to run travel on the fly, this is totally something you can do in advance. The bandit example that we just went through could basically be dropped in between any 2 towns or cities. Brainstorming a few little side quests that can happen during travel isn't that much more work than prepping your own encounter table, but it's gonna be way more fun and feel much more intentional to your players. By the way, are you actually prepared for your players to travel? Have you created your whole world, and do you have that information organized and accessible? Today's sponsor, World Anvil, makes that easy. It's a toolkit for writers, game masters, and world builders of any kind. You can document and organize information from maps to articles, stat blocks to historical timelines, and even run sessions through the website. Check it out. I just wanted to tell you I am obsessed with your new auto linker. Automatically scanning for relevant keywords and adding links to related articles? Genius. It saves me so much time. I swear, you guys are like tech wizards.
Wizards? Who told you that? There are no wizards, it's a website. It uses technology.
Okay, whatever you say. Hey, what's north of my main continent again? I know I wrote something down, but I can't remember what it was. The Scarlet Archipelago. Your NPC Sojoral was born on the largest island, Aesonia. Thanks. What language do they speak in the Bone Valley? Osseous. It has a northern and a southern dialect. Oh yeah! Did the king of Averos get assassinated before or after? Hello? Huh. It's taking a really long time to load all of a sudden. I wonder if they're having some kind of server problem. If you want to see World Anvil in action, check out the link in the description. You can create a basic account for free or use the code Ginny to get 40% off any annual membership. And there are no wizards. Trust me, none. So you're trying to spice up your travel through a wintry tundra, and you have the players roll to see if they catch a cold. Cool. Your players each roll a die. There is a result. Maybe you even do it multiple times. Are we having fun yet? Calling for a roll might seem like something to do while traveling, but it often doesn't lead to any real engagement. Players come upon a river and roll athletics to cross it. Players need to make camp and roll perception to find a good spot. Players roll survival to see if they find their way, and maybe they roll poorly and the journey takes an extra day. Great work! In trying to make your journey interesting, you have only made it longer. When you find yourself wanting to do one of these single roll challenges, think about how you can turn that one roll into an experience, something your players get to actually do. Let me give you some examples. Okay, so it's freezing out. Instead of rolling a con save to see if you catch cold, maybe players have to decide between taking shelter earlier than planned to get out of the weather or pushing forward anyway. They find a good place to take shelter, but there are other creatures already there, trying to keep out of the storm. Perhaps they have to decide between lighting a fire, which draws attention, or rolling progressive con checks and maybe taking a point of exhaustion from the cold. If they decide to push on, they might face a series of challenges in navigating through a snowstorm, conserving heat, fighting winter monsters in low visibility and difficult terrain. These kinds of experiences encourage players to creatively problem solve. This is a great opportunity to take a page from Matt Colville or Matt Mercer's book, you know, the DMs, the Dungeon Mats, and introduce a skill challenge. Matt Mercer uses a skill challenge in Critical Role Campaign 2 when the party is making their way through the forest to find the hag. It's a perfect example of how to make travel through the wilderness into a way more interactive experience than just rolling for survival. Travel doesn't have to be dangerous to be interesting either. It can also be a great opportunity to get to know fellow party members through roleplay. Of course, as a DM, you can't force your players to roleplay amongst themselves, but there are things you can do to encourage it. For example, you can put items or places into your player's path that are ripe for roleplay moments. Maybe they make camp right beside a natural hot spring where players can relax, open up, and maybe get their flirt on if you run that kind of game. Maybe they stumble across a cache of liquor that has clearly been abandoned here for years. Drinking game, anyone? Maybe they sleep in a strange ring of trees that gives them all terrible nightmares. nightmares, anything that you think will get people talking. If they need a little more prompting, social encounters can also be a great way to encourage roleplay. They can meet locals or fellow travelers who ask them questions, give them information, or treat them kindly or poorly. Imagine your players meet a fortune teller on the road. She asks to share their campfire and gives a reading to any interested party member. This can get them thinking about their personal quest lines and talking about their backstories and goals. Who wants a reading and who scoffs at it? Why? Do players take these readings seriously or are they skeptical? This is also a fun chance as a DM to plant clues that don't necessarily have to be true. If that doesn't spark conversation between characters, I don't know what will. Or a traveling merchant can introduce fun, interesting new items or weapons. In one of my home games, our party crossed paths with a traveling salesman called Dr. Alabaster. He sold us healing potions that we weren't 100% sure would actually work like a regular healing potion. Negotiating with him, trying to insight check him to see if he was conning us, and then later taking a risk downing that potion during combat was all really fun and memorable. Depending on how players treat the people they encounter on their journey, you can introduce NPCs that will come up in the game later. Helping someone in need might benefit them down the road if this person has power or has influence over someone with power. Harming someone might come back to bite them. And an innocent campfire conversation with a stranger might end up giving them important information for a future quest. I know I keep referencing Lord of the Rings, but come on, take a page from Two Towers and give your players a golem to bounce off of. If you heard those 3 tips and it sounded like a lot of work, that's fine. You don't actually have to make travel interesting. As Matt Colville rightfully says in his video about travel, unless you think that traveling through the wilderness is going to advance the plot, I am giving you permission to just skip it. If none of this sounds fun for you, or if you don't have any bright ideas for tying your journey into a story, you're allowed to just not do it. Maybe roll to have players determine if their journey goes smoothly or not, and include consequences, like taking longer, using up more rations, etc. But you don't have to roleplay every day of travel if you don't think it'll add to your game. Every table is different, and some tables might prefer to fast travel and get to the good stuff. But if you, like me, were way too strongly influenced by epic fantasy journeys in books and movies and really want to have some travel moments, I hope this will help you avoid those draggy, boring sessions that are occasionally broken up by a random and inconsequential fight. I don't know about you, but boring my players is like my #1 biggest fear as a DM. If that's you too, then you should definitely watch my video about fixing boring D&D combat next. I walk through 4 steps to keeping combat moving, retaining your players' attention, and making each combat feel unique and narratively driven. What do you think is your biggest weakness as a DM? I would love to hear it in the comments.